So now we're on to the second part of reversing the cycle, the cycle of low confidence, of these feelings like awkwardness, self consciousness, shyness, social anxiety. So here I have that chart again. This chart that shows the cycle that you go through from beliefs to behaviors to how people respond to you, and then explanations that lead to more beliefs. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can basically break this cycle by taking it apart. I'm going to show you how you can, improve the other parts of this cycle so that you can get new beliefs in your head. So I'll start at the beginning, the top of the chart. And this is about early childhood traumas. It's about inferiority, insecurities, those deep-seated beliefs about shame. So the question here is, how can you get over those things which are often caused by early childhood traumas, like toxic shame and other basic starting points? So how do you get rid of insecurities? Well, let's go back to that question I talked about before. What are you most afraid of people noticing about you that will lead them to reject you? So what do you feel afraid to share with other people? And the technique, which I'm going to tell you to get over this type of shame or insecurity, it's a little bit scary, because basically I'm going to tell you to share yourself, to share what you feel ashamed or insecure about. This is called vulnerability. So whatever you feel ashamed or insecure about, whatever your answer to that last question was, the best solution is to find a safe person to share it with. And this is why therapy is often something that helps people. Because if someone who has social anxiety goes in to see a therapist, and the therapist can, provide a safe environment for that person to really express their true feelings, their true views and opinions, then having a safe person who's gonna, give them space, give you space to share yourself, that's gonna allow you to expose those areas which you feel insecure or ashamed about. That's really why therapy helps all the time. It's not because the therapist knows some kind of magic techniques. It's because the therapist knows that if you give someone who has a fear of rejection, acceptance, then that's going to give them an experience that unwires the old fear of rejection. So by exposing your flaws or your insecurity to someone that you trust, you can slowly dissolve the shame around it. This is like you're testing the reality. So you're probably keeping something hidden about you. There's something that you're afraid to share, but then you decide to share it, or maybe to share a part of what you feel ashamed about. And when you test reality by deciding to do that, then you can then find out if people will or will not reject you. And 99% of the time, when you do this, when you decide to test reality and be vulnerable and share something that you used to feel ashamed about, 99% of the time, you'll find that people aren't going to reject you for it. Unless it's something completely horrible like murder, something completely unethical like that, people will almost never reject you for the things that you feel so ashamed and insecure about. I got caught by someone watching porn, alright, and this is something that I felt extremely ashamed about for a long time, and I was sure that this is an experience that I would never share with anyone, because at the time it was so embarrassing and humiliating for me. And the more secret I kept this and other things I felt ashamed and insecure about, the more I found that the shame tended to grow. There's a best-selling author called Brené Brown, and what she says is that shame needs secrecy to grow. When you keep something hidden about you, it turns into a deep, dark secret. When you take the leap and you expose something about you that might be a little embarrassing to someone else, and you find that nothing happens, you get a feeling of relief because you realize, I shared something personal, something that I used to feel ashamed about with this other person, and they still accept me. They didn't reject me. It's okay for me to be the person who I am. I am good enough as I am. There's no reason why I am not enough to have close connections with friends, to have people like me, and so on and so forth. Another technique for overcoming insecurities is don't buy into the media's value system. The media, like the radio, television shows, movies, especially magazines, they often brainwash you into having certain beliefs. And the media, when it comes to physical insecurities, the media often makes you think that a good looking person is the most valuable person. But really, someone who's good looking just got lucky in getting the right genes. So would you think a lottery winner was superior to you? Probably not. Another way to overcome shame and insecurities and inferiority is to silence your inner critic. This means that you need to speak to yourself in a more compassionate, self-soothing way. A lot of people believe that if you're hard on yourself, if you really tell yourself that you need to improve, then you're going to do better next time. But the truth is, beating yourself up over mistakes just reinforces shame. So let's say you weren't confident in a social situation, or maybe you embarrassed yourself, and then after that social situation, you start to beat yourself up. Well, if you do that, you're going to feel more insecure and more ashamed because of that inner critic. And that's just going to make you less confident in the future. So be more compassionate to yourself inside your head and be less critical. This is what's going to make you more confident, not beating yourself up. Think about how you would talk to a 5-year-old child who was struggling with your problem. Another way to overcome insecurities is to give up comparison. You are not other people, and therefore you shouldn't try to measure up to their standards. In the same way, other people shouldn't try to be you or measure up to your standards. People's value is in their uniqueness. There's only one of you. And comparison is a losing game because you'll never win. Even if you become the best in the world in one area, even if you climb the ladder all the way to the top, there's still going to be so many other areas of life where you're not going to be even close to being the best. Right? Even if you become the best in the world at golf, even if you're somebody like Tiger Woods, there's still going to be 100 other sports which you probably are not good at all at. Even if you become the president of a country, there's still going to be hundreds of other countries which you have little to no control in. So don't compare yourself to other people's accomplishments because everyone is climbing a different ladder, so you should focus on climbing your own ladder. This means that it's best to simply compare your current achievements with your past self and feel proud for your progress. See, other people's background and talents or challenges, they're not the same as yours. Another way to overcome that shame and beliefs of inferiority is using unconditional self-acceptance. This means that you accept yourself with all your flaws and shortcomings and strengths just as you are now. So look for that feeling of shame around any part of your appearance, your performance or success in life, in your career. See if there's any shame around your sexual drives and so on and so forth. Wherever you feel shame, that's the part of yourself that you most need to accept. Most of the people who are the most influential in psychotherapy, in psychology, they talked about unconditional self-acceptance as the cornerstone of living a fulfilling and happy life. And the way that I see it, self-acceptance is like the bridge to confidence. A lot of people who are insecure, they want to become confident, but they can't, right? They can't figure out a way to go from being insecure to confident. So to me, self-acceptance is like that in-between step. You can't go from being insecure to confident, but you can go from being insecure to self-accepting, which is almost like feeling neutral about yourself, and then you can go to being confident. But acceptance is that very, very important in-between step, which is what you should be aiming for now. And by the way, just because you accept yourself as you are now doesn't mean that you have to give up improvement. A quote from a guy called Carl Rogers, he said that it's funny how only when I accept myself, then I can change. So it's not that you should give up trying to improve yourself or to improve your life situation. But if there is some part of your appearance or your life right now that is the way that it is, I suggest that you accept it if you want to be happy. Think about it this way. Insecurities are about as useful as trying to put the pin back in the grenade. Imagine you're a soldier with a grenade and you pull the pin out of the grenade, which means that it's going to explode. If you try to put the pin back in, that's not going to do anything. That bomb is still going to explode. So in the same way, if you're stuck with some insecurity, if you're a certain height or if you look a certain way, I mean, that just is what it is. So accept what you can change, and whatever you can change, then feel free to work on that. And all these techniques that I've just explained to you, they're all meant to lead you to the prime belief, which is that you are enough. All these techniques which I've just talked about, like vulnerability, like having your own value system, being more compassionate to yourself, giving up comparison, unconditionally accepting yourself, all these techniques are meant to dissolve that shame and insecurities and inferiority and give you this belief that you are enough. And when you feel like you are perfectly okay as you are and that people could like you just for you, then a lot of the nervousness that you feel around people goes away, because no longer are you trying to put on a performance or hide parts of yourself to make people like you. This allows you to open up and talk to people in a much more relaxed way without being guarded or thinking that you need to make them see you a certain way for them to like you. Alright, so that's a few of the most powerful techniques that I know for eliminating those beliefs that start the cycle, right? And by the way, if you do have really deep issues relating to early childhood traumas, then I'd suggest that you go see a therapist, right? If these tools don't help you, and even if they do, it's always helpful to be able to talk to somebody about these deeper issues. So if you do need help and you can get it, then I'd really suggest that you go out and seek that professional help if you feel like you need it. And now I'm going to move on to another part of the cycle. I'm going to show you how to break another part of the cycle. The second part is low status behaviors. So the reason why it's important to start changing your behaviors from low status to high status is because when you can change your behavior directly, it's going to have an effect on how other people respond to you. So that's why I spent all of week 2 and module 2 talking about different ways that you could have a more high status voice and more high status body language. When you make those changes in your outer behavior, you're going to get people begin to respond to you much differently. And when people start to respond to you differently, that's going to feed into this cycle. It's going to start to break the cycle in this area too. And you're going to start to get new and different evidence where people listen to you and like you more. Another way that you can change your behavior to break this cycle is what I explained in the last video, with an assumption of acceptance. So the way that you break this cycle of having bad behaviors that lead to people responding to you badly is you assume that they're going to respond to you well, right? And you try to communicate that in the way that you approach them. So approach people with the same warm, welcoming energy as you would approach an old friend. The way that you walk up to people and the way that you introduce yourself, you should expect them to be nice and friendly to you. The way that a lot of shy people meet new people is you meet them in a way where it's almost like you expect them to be nasty and mean to you. And back in the last video when I talked about my story about going out and meeting women, that's definitely what happened to me. When I was afraid of rejection and I expected to get rejected and I expected girls basically to reject me, to be mean to me, that's exactly what happened. They saw my lack of confidence and they weren't, interested or attracted in any way, and they actually did reject me. But then when I changed that, when I assumed that the girls that I approached would be more nice, more friendly, when I assumed that they might even be attracted to me and interested, then that came through in my behavior. I was more confident. I approached with less nervousness. And what happened is that the evidence I got from the real world also changed at the same time. Another way you can break this cycle is to meet new people. See, people usually give a lot of weight to the first impression they have of you. So a lot of people are either going to see you as being a shy or a confident person for a long time just based on your first meeting of them. And you can use this to your advantage. You should meet lots of people who don't know the old you. And what I've found is that if you used to be shy or quiet and you meet someone new, and when you meet that person for the first time, you're more confident, you're more talkative, then it's going to be easier in the future to act more confidently and more talkatively around this new person, the next times you see them. So if you're always around the same people that you've known for years and years and years, then you'll probably act the same way that you've acted for years and years and years. But if you start to change your outer behaviors to make them more high status, and at the same time you start meeting new people, then these new people are just going to accept your new behavior, your new high status, as being the way that you are. They're not going to know that you used to be shy or quiet. And because of this, you're going to be able to break that old pattern. So just being around the same people all the time doesn't break the cycle of old patterns. The quickest way to change is to put yourself into situations where you can meet a lot of new people. So for example, I already mentioned how I went traveling for 6 months in Southeast Asia. During that time, I stayed in hostels and different guest houses, and I was meeting new people all the time. In fact, I was basically moving to a new location every 4 days, maybe every 2 weeks. So every week or two, I was going to a completely new environment and, getting to talk to completely different people. And by doing this, I found that, I could really improve my social skills and my confidence much faster because I wasn't weighed down by those, expectations that, I should be acting shy or quiet. People who you've known a long time, they have a certain expectation that you're going to act the way they've acted in the past. And this can usually put a pressure on you to keep acting shy or quiet. So get out there and meet new people. If this means moving away to a different city to find a job or go to college, that may be worth it. If this means taking a summer to travel, maybe like I did, then maybe you should try that. Or maybe you can try as an experiment, go work on a cruise ship for a few months where you're constantly having to meet new people. These types of situations are really, really great for improving your social and conversation skills a lot in a very short period of time. So now I'm going to move on to another box, and this one is the evidence box of the cycle of confidence. So when I say evidence, I basically mean you're finding proof for your beliefs. When you have a certain belief in your mind is designed to focus its attention on finding real-world evidence to back up that belief. I'll give you an example of what I mean here. As you're listening to this training program, look around your room or wherever you are now and try to find everything in your environment that's red. Alright, so look around for a few seconds and try to find all the red objects. And now, close your eyes and try to remember all the red and yellow objects in your room. Alright, so try to remember all the red and yellow objects in your room with your eyes closed. And now open your eyes and now try to look for the yellow objects. So what did you find out from that experiment? Well, I bet you found out that, when you tried to remember the yellow objects in the room, you probably couldn't remember them as well as the red objects. So that's an example of how your mind has a selective focus. It doesn't pay attention to all of reality. It only pays attention to certain parts of reality. So when you have a belief like, people don't like me, or I'm not attractive, or something like that, then your mind will often find real-world evidence to back up that belief. I'll give you another example. There's a lot of people who believe in God, and I'm not gonna judge you if you believe in God. That's your religion. You can believe in what you want. But one thing I've noticed is that some people who believe in God, they often talk about God's miracles in everyday situations. So I remember one news story was a guy's house collapsed in a tornado, but the guy was found alive in the wreckage of his house, and a lot of people were saying that this was a miracle of God, that this guy was still alive even though his house had collapsed. But think about it this way. Why didn't these people focus on the fact that, the house collapsed in the first place? And if God controls everything, then didn't God control the house collapsing or the tornado? Why did God create a reality where tornadoes could even exist? So this is just one example of how people have a selective focus. They have a certain belief, and then they find evidence for that belief, and they often ignore evidence against that belief. And by the way, I'm not saying anything against religion. I'm just using this as an obvious example. So what you need to realize is that your beliefs distort your perception of objective reality. When you have social anxiety, you don't remember the world the same way that other people do usually. And I'll give you an example. Back when I had really bad social anxiety, really, really bad social anxiety, I would sometimes walk down the street, and if I heard people laughing at me behind my back, I would instantly get this feeling of embarrassment start to come up. And why? It's because when I heard people laughing and I was walking around by myself, because of my social anxiety, I assumed that they were probably laughing at me. My social anxiety was causing me to interpret the world in a certain way. It was distorting my perception of the world. The people were never actually laughing at me, but because I felt bad about myself, because I felt so insecure, I was very open to looking for evidence to back up my insecurities, to back up the way that I felt about myself. So I assumed that any attention that I might receive as being negative instead of positive. The way that my mind worked is that it was reinforcing its beliefs. What the thinker thinks, the prover proves. That's a quote from Robert Anton Wilson, who's a very, very intelligent writer. And basically what he's saying is that there's two different parts to our mind. There's one part which he calls the thinker, and that you can almost see as being your beliefs. And then there's also the prover, which you can see almost as being another part of your mind that tries to find evidence to back up your beliefs. So what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. When you have a certain belief, your mind is going to try to prove that belief by looking at the world, by selectively focusing on certain experiences that you have and trying to reinforce your beliefs. So this means they need to be careful about what evidence you focus on. See, socially anxious people, they usually are constantly reliving and reimagining past embarrassing situations in their head. Have you ever made a fool of yourself and then replayed that same situation over and over and over again in your head? I bet you have. And when you do something like this, you're basically drilling that negative evidence into your head even more. You're reinforcing those beliefs that cause you to feel ashamed or embarrassed about yourself or insecure even more. So here's one way to hack this area of your mind. You can overcome this by consciously choosing to replay positive evidence over and over again instead. So instead of focusing on and dwelling on past embarrassing negative situations, do the opposite. Whenever you have a conversation that went well or even okay, you should try to dwell on that and replay that evidence over and over again in your head. If you start out with 0 friends and then you make 1 friend, then instead of focusing on how you have way less friends than anyone else, focus on the fact that you do have 1 friend. If you're a shy guy who wants to get better at talking to women, and you go out and you talk to 5 women and 4 of them don't really talk back to you, but then you have a 5-minute conversation with 1 woman, then you should focus on that 1 conversation and not on the 4 that were negative. See, in the beginning, when your social and conversation skills still aren't that good, you'll probably still be getting some negative evidence. You'll probably still run into situations where you're maybe awkward or you embarrass yourself a bit. And what you have to do if you want to be confident is you have to ignore that negative and you have to focus on the minority of your experiences which are positive. Focus on those little wins, those little positive experiences that you have in the beginning, and really blow them out of proportion in your mind. So you want to shift the balance from always focusing on evidence for negative beliefs like I'm not good enough, I'm bad at talking to people, I have few friends and nobody likes me. Shift your focus from focusing on stuff that reinforces those beliefs, and instead try to look for evidence for good beliefs. So if somebody is nice to you, focus on that. View it as evidence for I'm a likable person. If you talk to an attractive woman or an attractive man and you talk for a few minutes and you have a good conversation, but then at the end they tell you that they have a girlfriend or boyfriend, instead of focusing on the bad part, focus on the good part of the conversation. In fact, even if you talk to someone for, let's say, 15-20 minutes and it was a pretty good conversation, but then at the end you run out of things to say or you create an awkward silence, focus on the good part of that conversation and try to replay the good part of that conversation. And by basically choosing to focus on positive evidence, by evidence for positive new beliefs, your brain is going to start to take on new beliefs, right? So in the beginning, you'll have to ignore a lot of negative evidence and focus on just a little positive evidence that you get occasionally. But soon, as you focus on the positive evidence, it's going to build new beliefs. It's going to break that cycle, and soon your confidence and assumptions will get better, right? By focusing on the good evidence, you start to build better beliefs. You start to let go of your old insecurities and shame, and your confidence goes up. And then you start to get even more positive evidence, and it just gets better and better and better. And just one last quick tip. If you ever get obsessed over, maybe how someone treated you or what someone said to you in the past, here's a couple quotes that can give you a new perspective about, this type of obsession. The first quote is, "He who angers you conquers you." And the second quote is, "If a small thing has the power to make you angry, does that not indicate something about your size?" Right? So if you're getting obsessed over something, over some small embarrassment, or over someone maybe not being nice to you, that actually says a lot more about you than about that person. Back when I had really bad social anxiety, if someone was even a little bit mean to me, a little bit rude to me, I would probably think about it for days afterward. And now, if someone is maybe a bit rude to me or a bit mean to me, I'll probably forget about it within a minute or two, because I have bigger things to worry about. See, so in the past, when I used to get obsessed over maybe someone embarrassing me in some situation or someone making me angry, that really just said a lot about me and how I felt about my own size. So if you ever get obsessed with some kind of past embarrassment, try to keep these two quotes in mind. And now I'll move on to the last box of the cycle, and I'll show you how you can hack this last box, which is your explanations for reality. See, so the way that you can reverse this part of the confidence cycle is by using more empowering interpretations. So this means that you should always try to spin whatever happened to you in a social situation in the most positive way possible. So no matter what happens to you, you can always choose to either interpret it in a more negative way, or you can choose to interpret it in a way that is more positive and in a way that helps you become more confident in the future. So which way do you want to use? I'll give you an example. Let's imagine you try to introduce yourself to someone, and for the first few minutes, the conversation is a little bit awkward. An example of a bad interpretation is for you to start judging yourself and for you to start telling yourself that, I'm so awkward, I'm such a weird person. When you start interpreting the situation this way, it causes you to feel more nervous, which is going to just make you feel less confident, and you're going to do worse in future social situations. An example of a good, empowering interpretation for the same situation is if you said something to yourself like, conversations with strangers often start out a bit awkward in the beginning. When you interpret the awkwardness in this way, it causes you to feel more comfortable and relaxed and confident, so that even if a conversation starts out a bit awkward, you don't freak out and you'll probably become better, later on. Another example of a good explanation for reality is everything is a learning experience and I'm improving my social skills over time. See, a lot of people who have shyness or social anxiety, maybe bad conversation skills, they get obsessed over tiny little mistakes that they made. They might embarrass themselves a bit and then wish that they could go back in time and correct whatever mistake that they made. I want you to let go of that type of thinking. Instead, think that even if you made a mistake, that's okay. Every social situation is a learning experience. Even if you make a mistake, it's still okay because you learned as you were in that social situation. And you even learned, from that mistake. So you should think that, even if you do well or you do poorly, when talking to one specific person, the most important thing is that you're improving your social skills over time. So let's imagine that you try to connect with someone, you tried to make a new friend, or maybe you tried to spark a romantic connection, but it didn't work out. An example for a bad interpretation of that situation is, I'm not likable, I'm a loser, people don't like me, I should just quit. Now, an example of a good interpretation, of a good explanation for what happened would be something like, it's not that I got rejected, it's just that we didn't have personal chemistry, you know? I didn't have anything in common with this specific one person, and that's okay. There's 7 billion people on the planet, and everybody is not supposed to like each other. One person's opinion of me doesn't make or break me. Who are they? The president of the world? One person equals one vote. See, so I'm taking the same exact situation, the same outside reality, but I'm giving two different explanations for it. So if this happens to you, if maybe you walk up to a woman that you find attractive and she doesn't like you, don't start to overgeneralize that every other woman has the same attitude as she does. If you try to talk to somebody and you don't get along with them, maybe the person has just way different values than you, maybe you're a Democrat and they're a Republican, don't start to overgeneralize and think that, every other person has the same preferences as this one specific person who didn't like you. One of the worst beliefs you can have is, it's important that I make everyone like me. A much better belief to have is, I have certain views, opinions, and values, and I will not change them to suit other people. If other people don't like it, then that's their freedom. See, so it's all different types of interpretations for what happens to you. Here's another great interpretation. It's called destigmatizing discomfort. This means that you're removing shame from discomfort. Whenever you feel emotions like anxiousness, nervousness, maybe shyness, you feel awkward, one of the worst things you could do is to start feeling shame about having these types of emotions. Instead, you want to think that what I'm going through is normal, and lots of other people have felt the same way too. Try to imagine other people going through the same thing, the same problem or situation that you're in. And also remind yourself that any feelings or emotions that you have are really just a chemical reaction in your body. There's an old saying that goes, the more personal an experience is, the more general it is. One of the worst, things you could do for your problems is to think that you're the only person who is experiencing this or who has ever experienced this. And this is what people usually assume. We usually assume that we are special snowflakes, that you're the only person in the world who has issues like feeling awkward or self-conscious or shy or being quiet or anxious in social situations. But the fact that this course that I'm creating now even exists means that your problems are not unique. There are many thousands, if not millions of people who have similar problems. In fact, even if most people aren't gonna know what it's like to have very bad social anxiety or real shyness, most people at some point in their life, they're gonna feel nervous at some point. They're gonna be shy in some situation. They're gonna feel self-conscious, maybe talking in front of a camera. Everyone you grew up with in school, who you work with, every teacher and boss you have, at some point, 99% of them are gonna feel this way sometimes. So this is what I mean by destigmatizing discomfort. What you're going through is normal, and lots of other people have felt the same way too. So don't feel ashamed about it. So that's basically a lot of different techniques you can use to reverse the cycle of a lack of confidence and low self-esteem. Basically, I showed you how to go into each section of this cycle and improve it. Everything from when your beliefs formed to how to have different behaviors, to how to focus on the right types of evidence, to how to have the right types of explanations and interpretations. And when you put all the techniques I've given you together, you're going to find your confidence is going to rocket upwards at an amazing rate. When you're working on many different sections of the cycle at the same time, the effect is going to become even better. It's going to be multiplied. So don't take this video lightly. There's some real hardcore psychology. If there is a science to self-confidence, then I've basically just broken it down for you step by step. And I've shown you how you're going to be able to become more confident by changing your focus, by changing your interpretations, by changing your behavior so people respond to you differently, by changing the way that you talk to yourself, by changing the movies that you play to yourself in your head, and much, much more.